What's up, guys? Welcome to another podcast. I'm really excited because today's guest is a local respected surgeon, Dr. Ruben Ramirez from the Buena Vista Laser Center and the Buena Vista Eye Center. We're really excited to have him on to share all things eye and how he became a surgeon. So let's get into it. Been a full circle, as I come, and editing is also evolving as well, like how we edit. I used to use Premiere and all this fancy bulky software, and today it's going to like CapCut, and you have the ability to fix everything in a person's face, their size of their eyes, their lips, it's amazing because we used to spend hours just searching for this kind of stuff on the internet.
Right. Sometimes I think about like the movies, from a young age, things like The Godfather.
Yep.
Martin Scorsese as director or Oliver Stone as director, but knowing that they had their role as director, but then there was the cinematographer, and then there's the editing group, yep. And to think that they made these amazing movies, if they had the technology that we have now to incorporate in some of their early movies, I think, I would love to see some of these movies try to be remade in the technology that we have, but
yeah.
But I think that definitely you will lose some of the original character of the movie.
Yeah, you talk about some of the ways that were created. My son's a big fan of 1950s Godzilla movies,
okay.
And he's breaking down things. He used to watch this when he was 10 years old. Okay, I'm like, okay, dude, where do you get this stuff from, right?
Right.
But he's breaking down like how it was made and how the props were made to make wind and to make,
I mean, it's like rudimentary back then, even though it was in large scale. I mean, these people had to create these things. I remember during COVID, it reminds me during COVID, and we were kind of locked down at home and there wasn't a lot going on. Me and my kids, we used to film stop motion kind of animation with a lot of their little monitos that we would find at the house. So we had these like sharks and these scuba divers, and we had these little army men, and we would do these stop motion animation like shorts on like if Shark Week was on TV.
Did they come out pretty good?
Oh, they were awesome. We would put music to them.
Yeah, I tried it one time with my son. It didn't come out as good, so we were kind of like experimenting with it.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of patience too.
Oh yeah, it does, and then again it goes back to the editing,
Exactly.
So I think that in terms of the world of film and video, even though the director may have a large concept of what he wants to deliver to the audience, I do really think it's the magic of the editors and the cinematographers that really make kind of that dream a reality.
Absolutely. Can you put the headphones down, Doctor?
Sure.
Yeah, just so for it not to come out on camera. It's interesting that you're telling me this because this last weekend I went to Comic-Con. Did you guys get a chance to go? Are we going?
No.
Okay, well, I went to Comic-Con and Ching Ching Chong were there.
Oh,
right?
Nice.
So
and the Blue Lorax.
And the Blue Lorax. We'll talk about that because I think it's really interesting. So I went up to Tommy Chung and I was talking to Tommy and I said, hey, Tommy, I know you've been a director forever. I don't know if you know, he was kind of like the director for all of the movies.
Yeah.
He was like, except the first one. But for most of the career, he was the director and Cheech was the star.
Okay.
And he would write parts for Cheech, and that ended up causing friction between them. And there was fights that would go on because of that, because then it was like, dude, we're no longer being this creative bounce back and forth. Now you're just like, you're controlling everything and I don't like it.
Right.
It's not what it used to be, right?
Yeah, because I imagine together, both of them, I mean, they're like a duo comedy act.
Yeah.
And I could see how, one taking the role as director, you could lose some of that, I don't know.
The dynamic,
yes.
Right? Between the both of them. Yeah, so I asked him, I said, hey, Tommy, what do you think? So I've got a social media platform. It gets between 3 to 4 million views a month. I want to get back into skits because I love skits. I love comedy, stuff like that. What would you recommend? He's like, do you play an instrument, man? That's what he asked me. And I'm like, yeah, actually I play drums and I play some guitar and stuff like that. And he's like, you need to create a jingle for all of your segments.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right on it, man. I haven't even taken the time to do that. He's like, all the movies that we created, the jingle we found was like the secret sauce. And when you think about and you talk to people about change, what's the first thing they tell you? Like Mexican American, right? They go to his songs, right? His jingles.
Oh, I would have thought it would have been more of like marijuana and smoking weed.
Right. So he said that the movie that they made, that they didn't produce music for, he said that was their biggest seller.
Ah,
Interesting, right?
yeah.
And they're both really, really smart guys. They were playing the part. There's a movie, it's called The Last Movie.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. I went to go look at it. It was really, really, have any of you guys seen it?
It was directed by Chong.
So both of them were in it, but
Okay.
I mean, these guys are in their 70s, 80s right now.
Okay.
I think Cheech is, 7 or 8 years younger than Tommy.
Okay.
So, but they told you, they go back to the history of what was being created. And really, they just created this alter ego. Like like Tommy's part, it was their lighting guy. They had a lighting guy that he was always on drugs, and he would fall asleep on the light, and so they would be at the last clip to da-da, and he wouldn't turn off the lights. He was asleep. They'd turn around and he was asleep.
That's funny.
So they were like, we're gonna pick up that character.
So how did they create the jingle? What was their inspiration?
So they were musicians. So Tommy was actually in a blues band, man. He played with he played with, back in the days with, you're talking about like going back to Hitsville and like the whole movement that was happening in that era. He was touring with some of the biggest artists, man.
Yeah.
He was part of Motown. Tommy was
Is
signed.
he from Detroit?
No, he was from Canada.
Okay, Canada, really?
Yeah. Canada.
I had no
But he
idea.
had moved down and he was traveling. He was a talented guitarist. And, so a lot of people look at him as their persona, but these are actually really sophisticated, smart guys. He
Sure.
said.
So I wonder, how did he get to Canada? Because I imagine he's...
Cheech?
Yes.
He was trying to dodge the draft.
Oh, okay, huh.
Yeah.
So he jumped north, and then what brought him back? I guess opportunity, or...
So they started putting together this comedy show. It was like more of a skit show where they would
Gotcha.
just do these live.
And from what I recall, there was a lot of famous Canadian comedians.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say Dan Aykroyd maybe was Canadian. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But there were a few Canadian comedians back in the day.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting to see. And he said, you got to understand how much sophistication goes into making something so simple, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just very interesting to me that these guys were portraying themselves as one thing, but they were really working out. They ate healthy, very smart guys.
So have you thought about a jingle for MonsterLink?
So for the business, no, not yet.
Okay.
I was thinking more along the lines. I've always been stuck on. I'm very fascinated with social media, as you know, and
sure.
we've had conversations about this with our psychology and how the impact and how it's changing us as humans, and what impact it has to convincing people, right? But I never thought about the jingle until Tommy brought it up, which was something so basic that brought me back to where I started. I used to play in my brother's band when I was like 10 years old.
So with this jingle, how would you incorporate it in terms of your social media? Would it be a different jingle for if it's a post versus a reel? Would it be the same jingle throughout? Would it be a different jingle if it was one was Facebook, one was Instagram, or one was TikTok? How would you distribute or create the jingle?
It's something that I think you should put on all your pieces of content, right? Whether it's TV, whether it's radio. One of the great local stories that I can share, and I share this because as you were speaking, he came to my mind yesterday because I was tuning into his funeral, Mr. Bob Krasny, who was the owner of Alamo Auto Supply.
Oh, he passed away. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he passed away. And man was always great to me and always took time to come in, very creative, right? And when I had come to Alamo to work at Alamo, I had been out for probably, the jingle had been out for maybe 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
They got rid of it. And the first thing that I came in, I was like, hey, Bob, why aren't we not using the jingle, man?
Sure.
That's what I remember about Alamo when I was a kid, right?
Alamo Auto Supply.
Exactly, right? You can still recite it to this
Sure.
day, right? And so Bob started telling me the history of the jingle, that he had hired a country group out of Nashville to create it. He spent $10,000 making that jingle. And I said, Bob, we got to bring back the jingle, right? So that's what brought back the jingle. Was I was on their butt, like, dude, this was gold.
Sure, but
that we were
think
sitting
about
on.
like, when did you actually hear the jingle? What was your experience? And so, I mean, I imagine it was on the radio, maybe it was on TV.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that media has evolved. I mean, since the radio and since watching commercials and maybe even billboards, I mean, media has evolved to where now it's ingrained in every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely.
Whether it's from waking up, falling asleep, using the restroom, passing time on a vacation.
Yep.
I mean, it is amazing how intrusive we allow it to be.
The kids don't care anymore.
No, it's just part of what they do. Their thumb eventually will develop or evolve, I think, because it's used so often in scrolling through. And what's interesting is, what catches these kids' attention, because there's so much distraction that if you can break through the distraction and capture the attention of someone in particular, I mean, how powerful is that? And I think that's where, I mean, it's, I think about it as wearing different hats. So I think about it as a father, and I worry about, what kind of influence is this going to have on my kid? Will it be a negative influence? I think about it as a business owner, and I see the potential of it being important in terms of reaching out to our community. I see it from the hat of as a consumer, and how it influences me, and what may come up on the feed, and how does it truly understand the algorithm of who I am, and why I see and hear what I see. I think in the next 10 years, I don't even know what to expect, how we're going to be interacting with this. It's going to be, I think, even more intrusive, whether that means it's not just going to, it's, like movies, you go from a 2D movie to a 3D movie to a 4D movie. How will social media evolve in that direction?
Yeah, we were having that conversation this morning with Orlando, and where it's going, and what, how AI is going to change everything. And it's a common, it's something that people discuss these days, right? Obviously, because things are changing so quick.
Sure.
But from an eye surgeon's perspective, what are you seeing, like, as far as people's eyes? Because there's so much there. I don't know if you're aware of, like, the technology that China has developed as far as, like, scanning the eye and where we're looking on screens. And
sure. I mean, I think it'll be, I guess, from a marketing perspective, I think it would be the data mining of where people look, like you said, I mean, is going to be important. Why? Because then you sell that space to the advertisers, I imagine. And if that's where, the majority of the people bring their attention early on, well, that's going to be kind of the, I guess, the higher retail market in terms of selling to space for the clients. I don't know.
As an eye surgeon over the years, because you've been an eye surgeon for 20 years now, right?
Yes.
And what impact are you seeing that social media and cell phones are having on our eyes?
I think that, definitely, I do think that there is a certain amount of responsibility on the side of, let's say, Android and iPhone, in order to kind of decrease the amount of blue light that could potentially affect our retinas. Fortunately, I don't think it's a significant amount of blue light that really induces any real damage early on, but I think that the biggest issue is more like from a dry eye perspective. We live in a city in El Paso that has like a 14% humidity, and we're staring at our phones all day or our computer screens. We don't really blink as often as we should, and our tears just evaporate. And so it induces a lot of patients tell me, at the end of the day, my eyes just want to close. They feel heavy. I get this sharp pain every now and then. And really, it's, I think, a consequence of being on the screens that, we don't blink as much as we should, because we are paying attention to what we're seeing.
So why is it that we blink?
Well, I mean, we blink if you think about what is the function of the eyelid is to protect the eye. And what can the eyelid or the orbit do to protect the eye? I mean, ultimately, it can close the eye. It creates tears, and the bony structure helps from trauma. So it's important to blink. So every now and then, important, just close your eyes. And I think that that's something that we should all do in our daily busy life, is sometimes just close your eyes, find some silence, reflect in that moment, and so that you can go back to what your obligation is. Because I do find we get so distracted. Sometimes our relief from our daily grind is to go onto social media, and you think you're going from one screen to another, and you're not really giving yourself time to kind of reset.
I didn't think about that. So.
Yeah, and then to go back so that you're more maybe aware or alert of what the task that you're trying to complete.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought that like blinking had something to do with maybe thinking or being nervous or things like that, but it makes sense now, and so it's a good thing. So when you guys see me blinking a lot, don't make fun of me, all right? I'm just moisturizing my eyes, all right?
Absolutely, it's the natural evolution of what our eyelids are for.
Yeah.
So the other issue is, as we get older, if you have good vision at distance, you start to lose your vision up close. And what we're finding is a lot of people are having to hold their cell phones even further and further away from them so that they can see it. Guilty. Or, thankfully, you can also increase the font size, which is fantastic. But I find that
what's causing that? Is it the dryness?
No, so that's just the evolution of the lens. So all of us have a lens inside the eye, and that lens hardens over time. And as it hardens, it just isn't able to change its shape anymore. And then you might notice you're struggling a little bit more up close. And so the pharmaceutical companies are really starting to develop medications for individuals who are losing that ability to see up close, and offering these medications, or eye drops, if you will, as a surgical alternative to kind of get them by. But eventually, after a certain age, kind of like 55, those drops really don't help anymore. And then ultimately, there are some nice surgical options that are available.
What eye conditions do you see most often associated with screen times and the desert? Is it the dry eye?
Oh, sure. Dry eye is probably the most common pathology that we see here in El Paso. It's just innate to the area. The amount of wind, low humidity, just the desert climate is, plus as we age, we unfortunately lose some of those oil glands that help moisturize the eye, and the tears just evaporate. I think in El Paso, we have a combination of what we call evaporative dysfunction, and reduced aqueous production. But I think the evaporative dysfunction really is the biggest villain.
And it's just happening because of age?
Well, it's age and climate.
Really?
Yeah, age and climate.
So if you live like in Austin where it's more moist, you have better eyesight?
Well, not necessarily better eyesight, but maybe you'll be more comfortable. However, they have their own allergens out there, right? So they may have more cedar than we have here, and who knows, in El Paso, we don't have a lot of cedar, so you might go visit Austin and suddenly you're like, man, my eyes itch.
Really? Yeah, so that's a big thing here in El Paso, right? Allergies. And how often do you get, you're an eye surgeon. I'm sure people are coming in and saying,
sure,
my eyes are burning.
Sure. A common complaint is going to be like foreign body sensation, itching, burning. And the springtime is no joke. If you're from El Paso, you've been through like our dust bowl in the springtime, and the high winds, the dust that gets blown in, the amount of allergens that come in from different cities that just get blown into here really causes havoc on a lot of people's eyes.
Are you seeing that the allergies start from the eyes because of the dust, right? We're breathing it.
Right. It's all the particulates in the air. They land on your eyes. They go into your nasal mucosa, into your mouth. These things, just think about, we're in the studio, we're breathing. You don't see it, right? But there's molecules all over us, right? And as we're inhaling, there's particulates that are in the air as well. Things like dust, what have you. And those things just get sucked in. But fortunately, our body can try to control most of it, right?
Yeah.
So we create secretions, we have hairs, and it'll try to filter. It's our own filter system. It's our own HEPA.
Yeah.
But some of those allergens can really cause a significant reaction, and unfortunately, it creates symptoms that we don't care for, but we deal with.
Yeah. Do you see people getting headaches from this kind of stuff, like from the eye, from the dust and stuff like
well,
that?
I think it's sometimes when patients complain of headaches and they come but they're in the ophthalmology office.
Yeah.
We have to think about sinus issues. So things like inflammation of the sinus cavities. Why? Because they surround the orbit, and that can induce a lot of referred pain. So we have what we call the trigeminal nerve. That trigeminal nerve innervates the sinuses, innervates the eye itself, and so you can get referred pain from all sorts, and then pinpoint it and complain, "It's my eye, it's my eye, it's my eye." But many times we have to think outside the box and know that there are other parts of the body that can also affect what we're feeling.
Because we live in El Paso and we have a lot of winds, as an eye surgeon, do you recommend people when they go out and it's windy that they wear sunglasses or some type of eye protection?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not only just because of the wind and the particulate matter that's in the air, but it's the UV index. So El Paso has a high UV index, and that can cause a lot of changes on the surface of the eye. So things like pinguiculas and pterygiums, and where individuals might say, "Oh, my eye's red all the time." Well, that might be just collagen that's changed due to the influence of the UV light that we're exposed to.
Wow. That's good information. We'll definitely cut that for people from El Paso, because I'm sure people are always looking for relief from this dust. I know my brother, every time he comes in town, he's like sick with allergies, man.
Right.
And he's like, I hate coming here because of that.
It's tricky. I think, for me, I being from El Paso, I love El Paso. I love everything about El Paso, the people, the food. But it's interesting when you invite a friend from out of town, and I try to not invite them during the springtime, which is crazy because you can't control the weather sometimes. And, when they fly into town and it's just completely browned out by a big dust storm, and they're like, "What are you doing living here?" It's, so I find the fall time for me is my favorite time in El Paso.
Yeah.
And the weather's great. The change in time, the sunsets are just gorgeous. The evenings are just so relaxing, so beautiful. The fall in El Paso really is great.
So, it's one of the things that I love about El Paso and some of the things that I hate about El Paso, right? With the weather. Anyways, I always tell people that we're somewhere in the middle between Phoenix and Austin, right? Austin, you get that, like, right? When you're dead of summer, it's like you can't even breathe, right? And you're in Phoenix, it's that like super extreme dry heat. So I tell people we're somewhere in the middle of those two.
Yeah, fortunately for Phoenix, I think they're closer to the water table, being not too far from the Sea of Cortez. So they definitely have, I think, probably a little bit more humidity in terms of rainstorms that go through. But unfortunately, El Paso is just we're in this elevated area. I mean, the mountains are so beautiful too. The other day, my son and I were looking at the mountains here, and we were actually thinking, we were thinking a lot about the mountains. Number one, how are these mountains created? And ultimately, El Paso was like the seabed for billions of years. And to think that these tectonic changes took place and they created the Rockies in our backyard. I mean, it's amazing just the power of the earth. And then we were thinking, well, how cool would it be if they were glaciers and you could ski the mountains of El Paso? Yeah. We would have some great runs.
Yeah, I always remember back when I was in school, them talking about El Paso being a divergent margin, right? So you have two tectonic plates that are pulling this way, right? So this is what creates the valley, right? And that's what created the mountains. My son asked me yesterday as we were driving back from San Antonio, he said, "Dad, what are mountains good for?"
Yeah.
So we're all trying to explain to him, well, a lot of things, like it
the
saves
beauty
you
of
from...
the mountains to me is probably number one. I mean, for us to be able to see these mountains and how majestic they are, and how they change colors, even with a little bit of rain, how green they'll get, how they reflect the sun on a sunset. I mean, to me, it is, we're blessed to, I think, be able to have these in our backyard. Yeah. One thing that I did with my kids a few years back, and we probably need to repeat the experience, is there's a dino walk that's over by Mount Crystal Ray, and they have all of these little QR codes of different
tracks,
tracks like dinosaur tracks, and I remember looking at them and thinking how they are more convex than they are concave. And you would think, well, why are they bowing out versus indented in? And you think about, well, how these mountains were created and whatever volcanic activity there was, and it just pushed the land out and up, and just everted those footprints. It's pretty crazy. I mean,
it's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
To think that there was once dinosaurs roaming, and
oh yeah, I mean that's so nuts, right? I mean, I think these crazy creatures were like running around and just the predator,
Yeah.
And you go through these conspiracy theories of, well, the asteroid that killed them all, was that mediated by some other life force that wanted to inhabit the planet because they realized, oh man, we can't live in union with Tyrannosaurus Rex.
It's so vast that, when I interviewed the astronaut, it blew my mind, first of all, just thinking of him getting in the ship and going all the way to space. But, he said, I asked him, so now that you've been to space, do aliens exist? and he said, I've never seen anything personally myself, but you'd have to be a fool to think that there isn't life beyond us. If you look at the stars, every star is a planet, and there's millions of them out there. And it just blew my mind, like just thinking about that kind of stuff. Like, we think when we think about hundreds of years, right? 100 years, 200 years, but there's just much more depth.
Oh, yeah. Billions and billions of years. I mean, think about, think about the periodic table for a second, right?
Yeah.
It's like basically a table of elements that make up everything, or at least that we're familiar with, that makes up the world around us, the world that we see. And to think about, well, how did these elements get to this particular planet, and how did they all come together to make it a place that's viable for life? I mean, and to think, well, all these things originated from some star explosion somewhere out in the distant past, and somehow the forces of nature just allowed it to happen. I mean, it's beautiful. It's overwhelming to sometimes sit and want to think about it. And I hope to never truly understand it, because that mystery of how all things work, I think, is fodder for creativity. It's fodder for introspection. And whether you're a faithful person or believe in a particular faith or what have you, it's interesting to contemplate.
Yeah, I think even if you look back and you look forward, it can be mind-blowing if you go too far, right? Like with AI, it's just...
my issue with AI, and I think it's fantastic. However, I think that slowly it's going to be difficult to be able to distinguish what is real and what is not real.
Yeah.
It already starting to become difficult to distinguish reality versus something that is AI generated. And I worry that we are going to get absorbed into this, not an unreal reality. So it won't be a reality, it'll be an unreality of sorts. And
it's playing tricks with our brains already.
Yes, right. And ultimately, truth may be lost. And truth will have different layers on it.
And I think also, too, even the younger generation are not caring about what's true or not anymore.
I agree. And I worry that I worry that there are going to be, I think we've talked about this in the past, that there's going to be consumers and there's going to be producers. And it's going to be the producers that create that unreality.
Exactly.
That is really going to have an influence on people that just consume it all day.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell my kids every day, you don't want to be a consumer. You want to be a producer of whatever you do, because you want to be the one that's influencing, or you want to be the one that generates that path. But you don't want to be the one driving blindly on that path.
With AI and tech and being an eye surgeon, what excites you most about the future of technology for eyes? Yeah,
I think that, there's so much. I think there's so much. And I really love ophthalmology because I think it's a field of medicine that has always been on the cutting edge of technology, in research. And even though in med school, or even when you talk to other doctors, they look at the eye as being kind of this inconsequential part of our body, but everything else is more important. But we forget that everything influences our eyes. Your diabetes influences our eyes. Hypertension influences our eyes. Cholesterol deposits influence our eyes. So I forgot where we were.
Yeah, I was asking what technology are you most excited about?
And so what's cool about some of the new technology that's on the horizon is 3D printing of parts of the eye. So for instance, I do a lot of cornea transplants, and currently we take it from donor tissue, and we take a donor eye out and we punch the donor eye, and then we sew the tissue on. But in the future, I think that we're going to be able to generate the patient's own cells and create a 3D printed organ that we'll be able to transplant to the recipient or the person in need. And I think that's pretty fascinating, because ultimately we'll reduce the risk of rejection because we'll be using the patient's own tissue.
Think we'll ever be able to regenerate an eye and
yeah, I
recreate
think
it?
so, but I think it'll be a while. I think the retina, because it's a part of an extension of the brain, and how delicate the retina is, I think it's going to be a while before we can regenerate the entire retina. But I think slowly, I think we have to start small, and I think that's what they're doing with glaucoma, and looking at things like epigenetics and how you can influence the genes to stop going down the path of a pathology such as glaucoma, where if we can turn that switch off that was leading the person to blindness due to glaucoma, then maybe we can figure out how we turn it, how we can turn maybe a different gene into a role of remodeling and rejuvenation or regeneration of that tissue.
Wow.
And so I think the studies in epigenetics are going to really influence the way we look at regenerative medicine. And I think that that's going to be a really big industry in the future.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated, like what the Chinese have done with, like I was talking about it earlier about retina, like where your eyes, they're able to track that. Our devices now pick up like on the technology of where your eyes are looking at, and they can tell whether you're happy or not, you liked it or not, just from the eye. It's amazing.
Right, yeah, because I assume it's looking at the pupil, and if the pupil dilates a little bit, well, maybe they got excited. It's kind of like what is it called when the CIA would take you and they're doing a polygraph test or something.
Wow.
They're looking at your pupils as well.
It just blows my mind that the eye. What do they say? The saying is the eye is the
window to the
soul, right? And we can tell what people are feeling from the eye. It's amazing.
Sure. And it's funny, from whose perspective do you think that they were talking when that phrase came up? The eye is the window to the soul. Is it the perspective of the individual? Is it the perspective of
the person,
someone else exterior to them? So I wonder, was it someone that said, "Oh, you're, looking at you, your eye is the window to your soul," or is it the individual? My eye is the window to my soul.
Yeah.
Where do you think it came from?
I think it comes from the outside in, right? That somebody's looking at from the outside in saying, I can tell if you're lying. I can tell if you're happy. I can tell if you're not, just because I see it in your face. I see it in your eyes.
Sure.
Like when people say, I see it in your face, it's usually coming from the eye area, right?
Sure.
Because of the squinting, because of the eyebrow, because of, right? But I find it really fascinating that a company was created around just that, right? And they went in and just started to really study this and created $1 billion company. I mean, it's the technology that's used in all of these devices today that tracks our eye movement.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that I imagine the camera is used to track it, right?
Yeah.
So who gave them the right to turn the camera on to follow you?
Yeah. It's happening in a lot of big box stores now. Where you're in and the cameras are not only tracking for security, but it's also tracking how you responded to a certain product, where you're looking at in the product. Are you looking high? Are you looking low? how often do we look up? How often do we look down?
Sure.
Were you happy? Were you not? And that data is being transmitted back to the retailers to sell you more things.
And I've always been one to say, if it's security is important to all of us, then I think that I would be okay with, our law enforcement agencies to have access to that data. I was always so amazed that when there was the Boston Marathon bombing, how quickly they were able to find those two individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing to me. And I can only assume that all the cameras that are out, outside department stores, Ring doorbells, or what have you, being able to have all of that data, I think is, I think it makes the world a safer place, assuming that, I'm not the role of criminal, right?
Yeah.
And I know that it can be controversial in terms of, do they have a right to all
Privacy,
that information? But I think that's just part of the world we live in now.
Yeah. Today we're being filmed just randomly, and
yeah, I always thought it'd be cool to have an app that could look at like all social media and be like, can you find a picture of me as a non-participating character in someone else's photo? Like if you were at a concert and I happen to be behind you in the concert, but you took a selfie, but I'm behind you, like could you find my image in everybody else's?
I'm sure we're going to be there soon.
Yeah.
I'm sure the technology is out there, but I'm sure it's going to be readily available where you'll be able to track this down. And I think as we see it, I had somebody reach out to me recently about a photo that I used like a year ago on a social, and it was like one split second, and they were like, "Hey, you used my photo without my permission." And,
right.
And we just live in this thing. It's like it's social media, man. Like how many times people have stolen my drone shots and they create their own content with it.
Sure. I mean, I think that so I would say that it's a blurry line, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about, well, what is your job, right? And your job is social media. And so let's say, what is my job? My job is eye surgery, right? If someone happens to be kind of in a post or something, well, I don't know. I guess it's tricky, right?
Yeah, it's very tricky.
Because if your role is to put things out there and you consciously know that you're doing it, then ultimately I think that there's more responsibility.
Yeah.
If I'm at a concert with my kid and I post it on my Facebook and someone happens to be in it, I don't think there's much responsibility there because I'm not primarily putting things out there for anyone outside of my friends. But if it's going to the public, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a blurry line.
It is, or in the sense, like, for instance, because you mentioned this, the video of the Blue Lorax, right?
Right.
The guy that filmed or whatever, somebody said, you didn't even give rights to the guy that filmed. And I'm thinking, like, what about the rights to the guys that you guys filmed without their permission?
Yeah. Sure.
Right? So it is a blurry line, and where do we go from here with this? I don't know. I don't know. I think this is what's Hollywood. You're having a lot of problems because people are just starting to use people's faces, people's voices, and they're just like...
Sure. I
mean, this is where you say what's real and what's not. What's...
Right. And what was real?
What was real? What happened?
And how unreal does it become later? I mean, I think it's... and what's so cool about it all is that, sometimes some of the best comedy I've seen has always been about the reality of living, Seinfeld, we saw him live when he came to El Paso, and he never used a single cuss word. There was never a political mention. There was nothing sexual or derogatory. It was all just about our daily lives and the comedy of being human. And I think that the whole argument that took place with the three elderly men is just the comedy of being human, especially in South El Paso. And it's a tough world here, and these guys were as real as it gets. It
was all about a parking.
Yes,
that's what it was all about.
Sure.
So. There's a lot of humor to that, and those videos get tons of views. Like it's crazy, and it really amazes me of what drives us to like that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Right?
And then the spin that it takes eventually and how it evolves with the blue Lorax and everything. I mean, it's just asking to be exploited.
So, being an eye surgeon, I remember when we were at UTEP, one of the kids asked you, what's been one of the grossest things that you've encountered that had to do with an eye? Could you share
so
the story? Because I thought that was really interesting.
So the reason we were at UTEP was there's an outreach program called Comunidad en Acción, which is a great concept here in El Paso. One of their projects is doing the Young Achievers Forum, where they invite a bunch of sixth graders to UTEPs, and they bring individuals in different industries to teach them a little bit about what they do, the amount of schooling it took to get there, and just give them something to look forward to, allow them to dream big, right? Which I think is fantastic. But I remember one of the kids asking me about what was the grossest thing I've seen, and I've seen a lot of gross things when it comes to the eye. I think that early on in my career, when I was doing my residency down at the University of Texas Medical Branch, was that an individual came in and he had a hook, like a fishing hook, embedded in his eye, and the bait was still on it, and the bait was still alive, moving around.
When you say it was embedded, or was it hooked in his eye?
Yeah, so it was embedded and hooked into his eye. So it turns out he went fishing with his kid.
It punctured his eye?
It punctured his eye, perforated his eye. And he went fishing with his kid. The kid went back to cast, and as he went back to cast, he came forward and it caught his dad's eye. And I remember thinking in the ER and seeing this and thinking, oh man, I'm going to create just as much trauma pulling this thing out as it caused going in. And on top of that, we've got this worm that I'm hoping doesn't have any like eggs or whatever, and that's going to start to replicate inside this guy's eye. But anyway, he did fantastic. We closed everything up, treated him to prevent infection, and he did great. But that live worm really did something to me where it's just icky.
So it was moving around.
Oh yeah. Wow. And I'm thinking, why not take this worm off, as you're driving in, or
just let's pull the eye.
Right, but meanwhile it's sitting there and just.
And so the worm was hooked and his eye was hooked.
Yeah.
And both of them were stuck in place.
Yeah. I remember first moving to El Paso, and it was in 2010, and I had just finished my fellowship training at the Baylor College of Medicine, and I remember in order to start work, I used to take trauma call for a UMC. And I remember one particular weekend, it was early, it must have been my first night on call. I was impressed with how many open globe injuries there were. So many bar fights with with beer bottles and ruptured eyes. But in particularly, there was this one little girl that came in, and she was, I guess, fighting with her brother. Her brother threw some scissors, and the scissors got embedded into her eye. And the girl was 6 years old, and my daughter at the time was very similar in age. And I kept thinking, when I saw this little girl and I was removing the scissors and closing up her injuries, just thinking about my daughter and thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to influence her life later? What kind of sequela is she going to have long term? And I remember just wanting to do the best that I could to give this eye a fighting chance at being functional.
Wow. And when you say embedded, again, you're talking about
sticking in, coming in with the scissors, still in there.
Wow.
It's impressive.
It's impressive what the body can go through. And take, right?
Sure. Fortunately, we have two eyes. And I think that was for a purpose.
Yeah, I think about the stuff like this. My aunt lost one of her eyes when she was really young as well, and she's lived her life with one eye.
Sure.
And I think about if you think about just closing one eye and just go about your day about it.
Sure,
it is a different experience.
Yeah, you lose a little bit of stereo vision.
Yeah.
Your depth of focus is a little off, but you can still manage it. You can still be very productive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how we can still function like that. Do you see in the future like us having maybe like a contact lenses that will have data similar to like where Ray-Bans is going and things like that, where there'll be data on it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are some out there currently, or at least I've seen some on some very cool movies.
Yeah.
But will it be mainstay? And I guess the question is, is it going to emit any kind of radiation that may be harmful to the eye tissue? I think they have to be cautious with that. How are they going to charge it? I'm assuming there's some pretty smart people that have already figured all this stuff out.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, is it something that you're just going to toss, right? Like you throw away a contact lens. I mean, that's a lot of tech to just toss.
Yeah.
So eventually, I think the cost of producing needs to be, affordable.
Yeah, and you think that'll one day be connected to our brains as well?
Connected to our brains? I don't know, right? I think that the image that it's going to project into our eye, and then ultimately that image will be connected to our brains. Is the contact lens going to be hardwired into us? Probably not. But maybe eventually there might be some, for individuals who have lost their eye, who have a age-related macular degeneration, and could we put a little bit of a like a little motherboard or some sort of switch there that's going to perceive an image and be able to be hardwired then to the eye to be able to see? I think it'd be great, especially for some of our military personnel who have injuries where they may lose an eye. And as a kid, I used to love watching Star Wars. Like I loved it, everything about Star Wars. And think of that, we might become cyborg. Elon Musk and what he's doing, I think it's fascinating. And again, the question is always going to be, where does it stop? How intrusive does it become?
Yeah.
Who is going to benefit from it?
Yeah, I think, and I haven't heard about this in some time, but Elon Musk was working on Neuralink, right? Which was the embedded of a coin-sized chip into our brains and stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like radio silence. Like we don't know what's going on with Neuralink, right? But it was pretty fascinating to think, and that's why I was thinking maybe that would be connected to our eye somehow. We would have data that's...
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea of like, using sunglasses or glasses that has the data first, I think is going to be the easiest step, right? Like Meta's, what are they called? The
Oculus.
The Oculus.
Yeah.
I think slowly contact lenses are going to be a little bit more intrusive. I think they're going to have to be very careful as they tread into placing technology in the contact that's going to be every day, only because of risk of infection and what have you.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, who's responsible if I get an infection because of the contact lens that I was using that Meta provided? I assume that there's going to be responsibility on the user, right? It's not like, I can get a drumstick and, stick it in my neck. Is the drumstick company responsible? No. But I imagine their legal counsel needs to think about these things.
Yeah, I think the technology today is, it's amazing where we're going with it. But today I saw a video where a girl was using the Oculus to draw a mural on the wall. And, I see us going there with technology, with surgeons. And,
I saw that they're using the latest Apple eye contrap, or I'm not sure even what it's called, but it's like their glasses that Apple makes. And my understanding is that they've started to incorporate it in doing eye surgery, where maybe it's Bluetooth connected to the microscope, and you're not having to look through the microscope. You're just looking through this particular
through the goggles. Yeah, no, that's amazing, and I'm excited about that. I think we're going to get more accurate with things, and things are going to get safer, and we'll be able to identify things that we never saw just because the machine's going to pick it up and analyze it.
Right. So from this perspective of like a surgeon, right now when we do, cataract surgery is probably the most common surgery we offer, and cataract surgery it's safe, it's quick, the recovery is fast, and it can be life-changing for a lot of people. What I really enjoy about cataract surgery is I see it as an opportunity for everybody, that it's an opportunity to customize your vision, right? And part of it is understanding the meridians of the eye. So when we think about meridians, well, where's the horizontal axis, where's the vertical axis, where's everything in between? And a lot of the tech that we're using now that captures the images of the iris and creates some of the calculations of the lenses that we're going to be implanting can then get sent to the operating room, and we use that through our scopes in real time, so we can see that. And once someone lays back, is their eye cyclotorsioning? So is it rotating in any particular direction? Where I implant my lens is going to be so important to identify the appropriate meridian. Otherwise, I could be implanting it in a different axis that could have a different outcome. But what's so cool is actually getting to see all of this in real time. Sometimes I feel like I'm a pilot in a cockpit, and I have like all this data that comes up, and it's awesome.
What's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about LASIK?
I think LASIK is a fantastic surgery. Number one, it's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of studies that have looked into the good and the bad of LASIK. But it is definitely a very safe procedure, and it is a very quick procedure to recover from, and it can be life-changing for a lot of people. I do think, though, that there are some individuals that are just not good candidates for LASIK. So it's important to be careful that if you're going to have LASIK surgery, to have the surgeon be the one that evaluates the individual, because there are some red flags that need to be identified. This shouldn't be something that's screened by a technician. It should be something that's looked at by the actual surgeon, and to kind of screen out the individuals that may not have good outcomes, that create this stigma of negativity that sometimes we hear about it. But I think that the surgeons that are cautious and know that there are other alternatives for patients outside of LASIK, it's important to kind of look at all options and see what's right for the person. So the important thing is, again, customizing the surgical approach to the individual, because one particular surgery may not be right for the other.
Yeah, what's one eye care myth that you wish people would forget?
An eye care myth. This is difficult. An eye care myth.
Or a belief that people have that you just wish,
right.
No, that's not right.
Well, one of my pet peeves in the eye world is that when I see someone bring Kleenex to their eye, it is like there's nothing worse in this world for me to experience. Why? Because so many times you see someone bring up Kleenex to the eye and their eye is open and they start touching their eye and they start wiping their eye. And if you think about Kleenex, Kleenex is just fodder for viruses, bacteria, fungus, and there we are just bringing it to our eye and just wiping our open eye with it, and it just drives me crazy. So when I see someone do it in my clinic, I have to stop and I have to tell them, listen, if you bring Kleenex to your eye, make sure your eye's closed. There's no reason to touch the surface of your eye with Kleenex, especially for patients after surgery. It drives me crazy. That is my pet peeve.
So you guys heard it from the surgeon. Do not touch your eye with Kleenex, man. Stop doing that. You're just making it worse.
We should do a video. The other thing is eye drops. When people put drops in, it's amazing how inconsistent they can be, number one, but number two, how they could potentially damage their eye by putting in eye drops. So especially patients after surgery, their eyes might be numb. So when they leave from cataract surgery with just a clear shield, we're asked to start their eye drops, and many times patients will start to touch their eye with the eye bottle, and that can cause a lot of issues. One of the most common things I see, which is really sad, is elderly individuals who have a little bit of neuropathy to their eyes, so they may not have the sensations that we had when we were young to say, hey, that's too close, let's get it away. And they have to put their drops in, either whether it's from glaucoma or whether it's from dry eye, and they start touching their eye, and as they touch, they mechanically traumatize their own eye. And many times we'll see these neurotrophic ulcers in elderly individuals that were self-induced.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just by touching
your eye with the bottle. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do eyes evolve? We've evolved as humans, right? How do you see the eye evolving over time?
I think it'd be so cool if we could see an infrared, or see in microwaves. But, I don't know if that's something that's actually
Really?
going to take place. But how cool would that be?
Yeah, I was always a fan of Cyclops growing up, from X-Men.
Okay.
And I always thought that I could control like lights and things like that by just
Right.
looking and squinting at it really hard.
Yeah. So what was that that line from The Matrix where Neo goes to see? I forget who she was, but he comes across this little boy, and the little boy is like able to bend the spoon, and Neo's like trying to do it, and he's trying to do it, and the little boy looks at him and says, "Do not try to bend the spoon. That is impossible. Instead, just understand the spoon doesn't even exist."
Yeah.
And so I think that,
Do you believe that the eye is still evolving?
well, I imagine, but I guess the question becomes how many, I guess, what is it? Yes. Okay. Let's take it to a level like here in El Paso. The fact that we live in the climate that we do. The climate induces a lot of change in our eye. And so yes, I think to a certain extent it does evolve, and I think it allows us to be able to live in this dry desert climate that we have.
Because eye color is also determined by climate, right, as well?
Eye color, I would imagine that's genetic.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? For some reason, I thought that, the color of our skin, the color is all because of climate and because of weather. And
Sure, I think early on, imagine just trying to protect you from melanoma from the UV light. Think about, I guess, I don't know if you think about white people and black people. Why does one group have a darker melanin than another? That brings me back to you're talking about the color of the eye. I had this patient who was active military, and when he was deployed, he decided that he wanted to have blue eyes instead of having brown eyes. And so he went to a doctor, I believe it was in India, and when he was deployed there, and they implanted these artificial irises inside of the anterior chamber of his eye. And I think that, the idea, I'm sure, was exciting to him. But unfortunately, his body did not like the fact that this foreign object was implanted in his eye, and he had a pretty significant reaction to it. And his cornea decompensated. And so when he ended up being deployed then from India to South Korea, he had one of the irises removed, which fortunately saved the cornea in that particular eye. But when he came back to El Paso, he had one artificial iris still inside his eye, and his cornea was completely swollen. And so we had to go in, take out his cornea, and then transplant the endothelial cells of the cornea that were damaged. And those endothelial cells worked as the pump function to reduce all of his swelling, and he got his vision back after transplant. But, it's crazy for me to think that he had to go through all of this because he decided that he wanted to change the color of his eyes.
Yeah, how do people change their color of their eyes? What's one of the things that people are doing? Is that what it is? It's like a lens exchange kind of?
No, so I guess, it's not something that I would ever recommend. I think that for me, it's important that you're happy with who you are. I think that that's where we have a lot of mental health problems, and I think a lot of it is just issues of how we perceive ourselves, especially in the time of social media. And I think that we need to be just happy with who we are. I think that if you can be happy with yourself, you can be happy with everything else around you. But unfortunately, there are some individuals who want to change the color of their eyes, and more power to them. I just hope that they're doing it for the right reasons. And there is an option to use a laser. We use what we call a YAG laser, and that can disrupt the pigment on the iris, and because all of us have blue eyes underneath, but some eyes are just more heavily pigmented. And so if you can disrupt the pigment, you can reveal the blue iris that's at its base. But that can induce glaucoma, that can induce uveitis, that can induce cataract formation. There's so much that can happen. And so that's one thing I think that is so important to me whenever I see a patient who's interested in any kind of surgery is to really talk about, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the alternatives. And I think that having that discussion with your doctor is so important, because I think even as a physician in a busy clinic, a lot of that stuff can be overlooked, unfortunately. But I think that it's the obligation that we have to our patients to really walk them down that path before any kind of surgical intervention is performed.
Yeah, the eye is so interesting. I mean, there's so many facts about the eye and stuff. And so thank you for sharing a lot of that with us. I know you say you got into being an eye surgeon because you thought lasers were cool, right?
Well, I mean, who doesn't think lasers are cool? But really, I think that, if we really kind of go back and think about my childhood and what it was, early on when I was a kid, I knew I was going to become a photographer for National Geographic. I mean, that was my goal. That's who I inspired to be. My dad had this beautiful collection of National Geographic magazines. We had this entire wall that was yellow in his study. And I remember as a kid going through all the magazines and being projected in, whether it was Mount Everest or whether it was in China or Russia or wherever the images were from, I would just kind of get immersed into it. But in the back of the National Geographic magazines, if you guys are familiar with them, there is a chapter on assignment that talks about the photographer and his journey to take those photos. And I always thought how cool it was and to be one of those photographers, and I thought that's what I'm going to do when I'm older. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's not what happened. But I remember in my first year of medical school in Philadelphia and being in the auditorium and taking my medical physiology class where we talk about organ systems, and the day that we talked about the eye and the visual pathways, and I remember specifically my professor liking the eye to a camera, and I thought, how brilliant is that? And I knew from that moment that I was going to be an ophthalmologist and an eye surgeon, and I was going to fix everybody's camera.
Yeah, you were also in Costa Rica, right? Is that where the spark for wanting to become?
Yeah, so when I was at the University of Texas in Austin as an undergraduate, I did an internship with Colgate-Palmolive down in San Jose, Costa Rica, and I don't know. I thought I was going to go into like international business. I thought I was going to go into maybe international marketing. I didn't know. And but I had some colleagues at the University of Texas who had connections in Costa Rica, and I ran with it. And that's when I realized that working 9 to 5 in a cubicle just was not for me. I just can't do that. And I met some fantastic individuals when I was out there. And one of the individuals was a physician, and just kind of thinking about kind of what he, I went to volunteer with them at this asylum for elderly individuals, and just listening to people's stories, actually, putting your hands on someone who has a wound and changing their bandages, made me realize there's greater importance in this life than to sit and try to sell toothpaste.
Yeah.
And so that made me kind of reevaluate my perspective and where my long-term goals were, and that's where I decided, maybe medicine was right for me.
Yeah.
My dad was a physician. He was a general surgeon, and for, I think, as any good son, I didn't want to do anything that my dad did. Maybe just growing up, I think it was seeing what he, the stresses in his life and working the hours that he worked as a general surgeon in El Paso. It was, to me, it was not something that I wanted to do, but my dad was tough growing up. He really ingrained a lot of discipline in us, waking us up early on the weekends to do yard work and what have you. And so I think that early on, it was like, I don't know, I guess I didn't know how to take it. But now, as an adult and as a father, I realized that the discipline that my father tried to foster in our household really was important in terms of who I am today, and understanding not only the dignity of hard work, but the importance of making an impact in the community.
Yeah.
And so, I think all of us are, everything when we, from our childhood to our adolescence to our teenage years to our college years, everything kind of molds us to the path that we're eventually going to take. And sometimes we might look back on it and say, I didn't appreciate those years, but now looking back on it, those years were so important. Just to say, to me, I think it's important to understand that we all have obligations. We have obligations as a brother, as a son, an obligation as a father, as a spouse, obligation as doctor, obligation as a social media creator, content creator, and really until we recognize and fulfill those obligations, that it's otherwise hard, I think, to find happiness. And so I think it's, thinking about where my dad came from and his childhood and making it as an immigrant to the United States and evolving in his career as a doctor from coming from a small ranch in Los Altos de Jalisco. I see where that discipline took him, and I can only hope that I can be as successful both mentally, physically, spiritually, and in business as my father was.
Can we develop those skills without the hardship? It's the thing that I worry about as a father as well, because growing up without a father, going through my hardships, I think are what formed me to work harder and have the discipline that you talk about. Having my coaches be like my father, drilling me, get up, do the things that are hard, because we're going to make things easier, right?
Sure.
Can people still develop those skills without that hardship, do you think?
I mean, I think yes and no, right? I think that creativity is born from necessity sometimes, and not knowing, not knowing like that there is a necessity can maybe decrease the creative pathway.
I like the way you said that. Sometimes creativity creates is built out of necessity.
Out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have the drive to find the solution, you'll never figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that drive of needing to solve something or needing to change a circumstance, circumstances shouldn't write the ending. So just because you're poor doesn't mean that you can't succeed, and I think but some individuals have that motivation, that drive to want to make a life better for themselves, better for their family, better for their community, and I think that's important to find that drive, and that's ultimately I'm hopeful that my kids will find that drive, to drive what they think is important to them, because if they can find a career where they'll be happy, knowing that what they're doing is important, maybe not necessarily to themselves but to other people. I think that's true happiness. Yeah,
I agree. I think what you said too has a lot of weight. What you said, and it stuck with me the first time I heard you say it. You said, "Be a creator, not a consumer," right? Because I think when we're consuming, we don't develop that creativity side, right?
Right.
It's just kind of put to the side.
Right.
Where that's what we're here for.
Sure. And why do I need to create if someone's doing it for me? Why do I need to evolve a situation if I'm distracted enough to not care about it? And that's kind of I'm hopeful in a lot of ways for this new generation, because they have the tools that they have with AI, and that I'm hopeful that this is going to be a generation of individuals that just prosper. I mean, I'm talking prosper, you know, and granted, life is going to be a little bit more expensive, and maybe the standard of living is going to be a little higher, and maybe their margins are going to be a little bit more narrow, but I think that there is so much opportunity for them to be successful.
What's a piece of advice that you often give to younger people that ask you, and you do a lot of talks, like at the one at UTEP, what's one piece of advice that you give to younger people about succeeding and going after your dreams, doing what?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that I believe it's important to go after your dreams, but you have to have a dream. You know, you've got to dream big, and whatever that dream is for you, you know, create it. Have a picture of it in your mind so that you know how to go after it.
Yeah.
You know, because again, like in anything we do, implementation is the hardest task. You may have a fantastic idea, but if you can't figure out how to get to it or how to implement it, it's not going to manifest. Mm-hmm. And so my wife has this great saying that I can't say it as well as her, and I may get this wrong, but implementation without action is just entertainment. So I'm going to I'll be entertained by someone who is thinking about creating something, but without actually implementing it, it's never going to happen. And so in the place of work, if we're trying to take on new equipment, if we're trying to take on new product, if we're trying to take on new surgical technique, if we can't properly implement how it's going to be offered, how it's going to be performed successfully, you know, it won't happen.
Yeah. You're from El Paso. Grew up in El Paso?
Yes.
And what's like your favorite memory of El Paso?
Oh, man. I mean, so many. I don't know where to start, but...
Or just, you know, one that you can share with us.
So this is going to sound crazy. But, you know, so my birthday just passed. I'm 50 years old now, which is fantastic. I feel so blessed. But on May 1st, El Paso used to have a parade downtown. And I don't know if it was a parade for laborers or a parade for the children. But I remember, for whatever reason, on my birthday, if it happened to fall on a weekend, we would always go downtown to the parade. And it would just, you know, go down Montana. And I used to, as a little kid, I used to think, oh man, that parade is for me. And then my sisters would hit me with the reality and be like, no, bro.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't even remember what the parade was for. I'd have to research it, but
wow.
Yeah, May 1st.
That is funny.
You know, the other thing were the horse races. You know, it was not often that my parents would take us to Cullen Park. In fact, I think I'd only been down there maybe 2 or 3 times. But I remember kind of where I grew up, you could look down towards Cullen Park, and you could actually see the horses, you know, running the tracks. It was, and you can still see it out there. I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, those are great memories. El Paso has so much history, and I think you and I have talked about them before, and you know, we can go down a rabbit hole just on stories and stuff, and researching. And I was telling you that you and I think that's one of the things that you had brought up to me is like, hey, I love the El Paso history stuff. Like, it's one of the things that's really interesting. I think a lot of people locally, but what's one of your favorite like historical stories of this area?
Oh man, I mean, I don't know. I think that, you know, it's not, I don't know if it's just El Paso, but the surrounding community for sure. I remember as a kid growing up and watching Young Guns and thinking about Billy the Kid, and to think that Billy the Kid was an outlaw kind of in this region, and you know, I think that's pretty fascinating. I enjoy taking. You know, we haven't been in a while. We should probably take a weekend trip out there, but go to Old Mesilla and check out the jail that Billy the Kid was incarcerated in. Or I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting with the Old West, the gunslingers, and just learning about that time. I think about it too. And last night I was kind of going down a rabbit hole as far as like understanding like history of El Paso, right? Like the oldest neighborhood in El Paso is Duranguito. And I was like, why is it called Duranguito? Like, where did they get this name Duranguito from?
Yeah, I don't know. Does it happen to come from the city in Mexico?
Yeah, so it was from people from Durango that were migrating up. And I'm like, okay, well, why were they migrating up here? Apparently at that time, it was opportunity and people were leaving. You know, we had German settlers. We had Chinese settlers here that were working on the railroad that were then shifting from working on the railroad to just going into normal life. So they had one of the oldest buildings there was an old laundromat of Chinese settlers. And when I talk about laundromat, don't think of, you know, the machine laundromat. These are by hand,
Sure.
that they would wash and
Hang.
that was the oldest neighborhood in El Paso, is the oldest neighborhood in El Paso, about mid-1800s. That Duranguito was created and is still there over 100 years. You think about that, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and you know, it's interesting because there is quite a bit of discussion and debate about, do you preserve it? Do you urbanize it? And it's tricky. I mean, it's difficult to but we do have some very cool architecture down. You know, one of my favorite things to do with my friends that come to visit me, who maybe live in Dallas or San Antonio, is to have dinner downtown and walk around downtown and see the architecture that we have and all the nightlife that we have in El Paso, whether it's the Broadway at the Plaza, whether it's a dinner at Ambar or at Cafe Central or you know, just walking through the plaza, the park in San Jacinto Plaza.
Yeah.
And what I think is fascinating is if you think about, like, okay, when they decided to plan the city, and you think about some of the high schools and you think about some of the parks that we have, and we're a border city, right? And so with Ciudad Juarez right across the river, and we have the San Jacinto Plaza.
Yeah.
You know, why San Jacinto?
Yeah.
Well, that's where that Mexico surrendered to the United States. Why do we have Bowie High School right across the border? You know, well, Bowie was a main character during the war with Mexico.
Yeah.
What else? Alamo Heights, you know, I don't know. But I think that a lot of it was developed to remind Mexico that, hey, we are independent from you.
Yeah.
But that might go unnoticed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was also reading last night that the boundary where Chamizal is, where the Chamizal is, that was a big topic for many years and wasn't settled until the 60s.
Yeah.
So apparently the river went south, right? And so the U.S. was claiming more territory than was actually theirs because the river moved. And so it wasn't settled until President Kennedy came in, and then they settled it, they signed, and they gave the land back to Mexico,
right? Which
is where their Chamizal is.
Sure. And returning to El Paso to me was an easy decision for my wife and I, because what I recognized in the eye world is that there's not a lot of Latin American ophthalmologists. Yeah. There's not a lot of Spanish-speaking ophthalmologists, and you know, being able to come back to El Paso, the city where I grew up, near the country where my parents immigrated from, being able to speak the language, I really think that there's so much in terms of cultural competency that we can offer the people in El Paso. I mean, 80% of my discussions in the clinic are in Spanish. Yeah. And so I think it's important, especially for younger kids that are from El Paso, to learn Spanish and embrace Spanish, because it's only going to help you in your career. You know, and where it's easy to want to forget the language, you know, that is so close to us. But it's important, I think, to learn the language.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I have the podcast too, and I fund it 100% myself, because I feel like I want to preserve that. You know, it's part of my respects to the people that came before us and laid down the foundation for us, my uncles, my aunts, my dad, my mom.
Sure.
You know, my grandparents. To me, it's really important. It's one of the big things that I do. And I felt the very exact same way when I got into advertising. There wasn't a lot of Hispanic-owned agencies. And I felt to myself that I wanted to represent our city, right? I wanted to as well bring some of that culture into the city, and so.
Yeah, because El Paso has its own identity. I think outside of other cities in Texas,
Yeah.
it has, it's a melting pot of Mexico and the United States, and it has its own character that is unique to itself.
Yeah.
And I think that cherishing it, respecting it, holding on to it is important.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Ruben, we've been at it for about an hour and a half, and I can sit and talk to you all day. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge. Always, I've loved, when we conversate, just your attitude towards the way you approach medicine. Buena Vista Eye Center, if you guys haven't checked it out, if you guys are ever in need of any kind of eye support or to go see an eye doctor, Dr. Ruben is great. They have 4.9 with over 500 reviews, and I always tell people, like, this guy cares. He's knowledgeable about what he does, and it shows just through the reviews, through the office, through everything, the way you hold yourself. I think it's great, and I want to also thank you too, because you've always been innovative. Like, every time we've brought ideas to you, you've always been up for it. And I'm sure after this, we're going to have a lot more local doctors come on the podcast to share their knowledge and share their stuff. And I know you guys are busy, so thank you for taking the time to come on and bless us with some of your knowledge and share some of the stuff that you know.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate your words. Ultimately, our goal is always, as eye surgeons in El Paso, whether it's Buena Vista Eye Care or Buena Vista Laser Center, is to do the right thing for our patients. And not only do the right thing for our patients, but to be able to offer them the technology to be successful in what we offer them, to be as precise and to be able to customize the experience to ultimately their goals. Yeah. Before I leave, I did bring you a little gift for your place here.
Thank you. Cool. Let's open this. Hey, look at that.
So I figured you could put it up on your wherever you want, but it's there might be, the cornea may have come off. It might be in the bag still.
Oh, really?
But hopefully it'll be a reminder of your, you just gotta slip it in, of the time when you've worked with us,
cool. I appreciate it.
And just remember, maybe when you're looking at it, that ultimately whatever you put out there, you're influencing the mind of every individual. So to remember, that's a
powerful statement. Yeah, no, I thank you for that. And I didn't know this. You were telling me before we jumped into the podcast that Buena Vista, the name Buena Vista, is actually a city, right? I mean, you guys named it Buena Vista because of the Spanish word for...
the literal translation of good vision.
Yeah, but there was a city, you say, that was here?
So it turns out there was a city of Buena Vista here in the El Paso area, which I think was there it's over there by where Sarco used to be. And in fact, I think that if you look off to the highway, if you're going eastbound, somewhere between Executive and Porfirio Diaz, there is like a cemetery that's just this random abandoned cemetery, which I think it was the cemetery for Buena Vista.
And that was on the U.S. side or on the Mexico side?
No, that's on the U.S. side, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So. That'll be another segment where we'll go
Yeah, we've got to dig into the history, and we didn't get to dig in as much on the history that I wanted to, but you shared so much good information on eye health and technology and where we're going with eyes, and just in general, eyes. It's an amazing thing, and like you said, you wanted to be a photographer, but I think this is better than any Canon 7D or 5D, sorry, and or any Sony camera out there. This thing is amazing, and us as photographers and videographers too, we're always like, how can we get it as closest to the eye, right? So I think the eye is what we're always chasing to get that same view and vision. So I think you accomplished your goal when you set out when you were a kid and you were looking at your National Geographic.
Yeah, like everything, things evolve.
Yeah, no, so thanks again, Dr. Ruben. Again, if you guys haven't gone to go check it out, check out Buena Vista Eye Center, Buena Vista Laser Center. Both are great practices here in El Paso. Dr. Ruben is local, guys. He's human. You guys can see him here. He talks. Most doctors will probably not even give you a time, and that's one of the things I've always respected about Dr. Ruben is he actually takes the time to listen to to our expertise and what we've helped with anything that comes with marketing. But he's always learning and evolving. He's always experimenting himself. So you know that you're always in good hands. You're not with somebody that's just stale. He's always moving. And that's one of the things I've loved about the practice in Buena Vista. It's always looking into the future, always looking in to see what's the next best thing for people. So,
well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. All right. That concludes another episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.